Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Kim Brown in Baltimore. The Tyndall Report, which tracks the content from evening news programs of NBC, ABC, and CBS, delivered their recent calculations of presidential coverage. And the results may not surprise you, but they are shocking nonetheless. Personality has overshadowed real policy coverage. And as Tyndall says, it is remarkable how little attention has been paid to issues coverage during this presidential cycle, one of the key issues being that of climate change. To discuss the lack of conversation around this key issue and how the representatives from around the world are currently gathered at the UN Climate Conference, also known as COP22 in Marrakesh, Morocco. They're anxiously waiting on the results of the U.S. election. And today we're joined with John Upton. He is the senior science writer at Climate Central. He is focused on shores and rising seas, and he also covers global policy, oceans, and wood energy. Upton also has science and business degrees and a decade of international reporting experience. He's written for the New York Times, Slate, Nautilus, Vice, Grist, Modern Farmer, and Audubon magazine. John, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Hey there, Kim. It's great to be with you.
John, the discussion of climate change was sorely lacking from the presidential election coverage, and even while savage storms and extreme weather were ravaging the country, what do you attribute to the lack of coverage about this issue?
Well, it's kind of become standard practice, and we kind of become numb to the fact that large media outlets tend to ignore climate change along with a number of other environmental and health issues. But really, to see no coverage of climate change during this presidential election and to have absolutely no questions for the candidates during the three debates was really quite egregious, given where we are in history. Right now, we're about to have experienced the third year in a row of record-breaking high temperatures. Scientists are definitively and strongly linking those higher temperatures to everything from corals dying to wildfires. And we've got diplomats coming together and experimenting with a brand new approach for trying to work together through the United Nations to reduce the dangers of global warming. So the fact that the media continued with their, traditional approach of not covering climate change is perhaps not a surprise into this election season, but it certainly is a very disappointing turn.
So what happens to the Clean Power Plan, one of the cornerstones of the Paris Agreement, under Clinton or Trump?
Well, Clinton and Trump both have very strong policy positions on climate change, which is one of the other reasons why it's so strange to see the media not covering this. But they really are polar opposites. So Hillary Trump is strongly supportive of efforts to reduce climate pollution and start trying to stabilize the climate. She's supportive of the EPA's Clean Power Plan, which would regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. And she's supportive of the Paris Agreement, which is the new United Nations framework that the world is now trying to hone into some kind of a meaningful climate protection strategy. Donald Trump takes the opposite position. He actually, unfortunately, parrots these science denial type lines about it being a hoax and all this sort of business. And he's speaking out quite strongly against environmental regulations. He is clearly an opponent of the Clean Power Plan. He's an opponent of efforts to regulate power sector emissions here in the US. And he's also a firm opponent of global action on climate change. And he's actually threatened to what he said he would cancel the Paris Agreement or he would try to renegotiate it. So most people have interpreted this as a sign that he would not take the Paris Agreement treaty seriously. He might well withdraw the US from the agreement. But certainly climate negotiators and climate experts and a lot of people around the world are very concerned about what a President Trump would mean for global climate action.
So, John, all eyes are on Tuesday's U.S. election and the influence the outcome could have on these types of discussions, especially the ones happening this week in Marrakesh. Now, it's said that countries rushed to sign the agreement last month that went into effect on Friday over a fear of a Trump presidency. Could the deal possibly fall apart if he gets elected?
Well, other countries are indicating that, including China, has indicated quite strongly that if the US withdraws its support for the Paris Agreement under President Trump, that they would continue to be a leader on climate change. So other countries are indicating quite strongly that they will continue to try to work to solve the problem of global warming. But without the United States on board, that's really a very difficult challenge. The US is one of the world's two biggest climate polluters. Its citizens certainly produce more greenhouse gas pollution than residents of most countries. And so to lose America's support for global climate action at this particular juncture in history could be really devastating for the United Nations process, but it also could actually lead to tangibly higher temperatures and more severe disasters in the years ahead.
John, many have criticized Hillary Clinton for not committing to an outright ban on fracking, especially at the federal level. And her support of natural gas as a, quote, bridge fuel definitely falls in line with what President Obama has stated about fracking and shale gas. But beyond support for the Clean Power Plan, there's a drastic difference between the presidential candidates' proposed policies on climate and energy. Is there, I guess, is my question.
Well, Hillary Clinton, the Clinton campaign have published extensive energy policy. We know from Podesta's hacked emails that they've actually considered some very strong potential measures for reducing America's climate impacts, including a very large carbon tax. So we know a lot about Hillary Clinton's positions, and they are very progressive. They're certainly more liberal than what we've seen from the current administration in terms of trying to pursue deeper cuts in the future. It's very difficult to speculate as to what Trump's policy positions are because of the manner in which he kind of speaks and thinks. But I think that it's safe, and I think everybody's widely assumed that his energy policies would be to support fossil fuel production at the expense of the emerging clean energy industries.
And lastly, John, I mean, the U.S. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has just submitted the final Clean Power Model Trading Rule. Now, is there any validity to the coal company Murray Energy Corporation's claims that the EPA is illegally continuing to work on the Clean Power Plan despite the Supreme Court stay?
It would be difficult for me to speculate as to, the ins and outs of that fairly arcane kind of a legal argument, but it certainly is interesting to see the EPA moving forward with some of these regulations at a time when it's under a Supreme Court issued stay. I'm not an expert, but I'm not surprised that by the controversy that has led to.
Indeed. Well, we've been speaking with John Upton. He's a senior science writer at Climate Central. We've been talking about the lack of climate change coverage in the presidential election cycle and how really neither candidate has been pressed on their policies or what they will do should they be elected. John, we appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kim.
And thank you for watching the Real News Network.